I declare open this hearing of the Senate Legal and Constitutional Affairs Legislation Committee in its inquiry into the Australian Citizenship legislation amendments, strengthening the commitments for Australian citizens and overseas measures Bill 2018. I welcome all those who are to give evidence today. These are public proceedings being broadcast live via the web. Can I, just before I start, pay a particular thanks to the staff of this committee and to my colleagues on the committee who've had a fairly hectic week last week with a number of quite significant inquiries we've been conducting, one of which went until 8:30 at night. And I know the secretarial staff have been working flat out to get a number of reports out, including some from the References Committee as well. I know a lot of them have been working over the weekend, so we particularly appreciate that. I should also mention Hanson, who've been doing a wonderful job in the last week at a number of hearings and getting transcripts out at a very quick pace. So I just want to acknowledge those on behalf of the committee. This hearing today is an important one, and I remind all witnesses that giving evidence to the committee, they are protected by parliamentary privilege, and that it's unlawful to threaten or disadvantage a witness on account of the evidence given. We prefer to take all evidence in public. However, under Senate resolutions, witnesses have the right to request to be heard in camera. If that is the case, witnesses should let the committee know at the earliest stage. When a witness is called to answer questions for the first time, we ask that they state their full name and address, and the capacity in which they appear. This is because it is, as I say, a public hearing. It's being recorded on Hansard, and we just want to make sure Hansard has the right words attributed to the right people when the written record is produced. The committee has agreed, consistent with Broadcasting Resolution 3, that any senator's office would be permitted to film and live stream proceedings today, subject to no objections being made by witnesses appearing. The committee's agreed that answers to any questions taken on notice at today's hearing should be returned by Monday the 25th of November. First of all, I welcome Imam Mohammad Tawhidi. If you could come forward. I understand that information on parliamentary privilege and protection of witnesses has been provided to you. We do have your submission, which we have... you haven't made a submission, I beg your pardon. What we do ask you to do, Imam, is to make a short opening statement, and at the finish of your remarks, the committee members will put some questions to you. Before we start, do you have any objections to these proceedings being filmed live?
No.
No? Okay, thank you very much. It'd probably be better if we get the hands of the committee staff just to ask people whether they have an objection. Yeah, sure. Because if they do, we don't want to embarrass them. Again, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And if you can let us have your opening statement, and I'll just remind you to say your name and the capacity in which you appear for Hansard's purposes.
Honourable Chair, Senators and members of this committee, Assalamu alaikum, greetings and peace be upon you all. My name is Mohammad Tawhidi, and I'm the founder of the Islamic Association of South Australia. I was born in Iran as a refugee and migrated to Australia with my family in 1995. I received my initial Islamic studies in private Islamic schools, mosques and madrasas in Western Australia. In 2007, I returned to Iran to engage in high levels of Islamic studies. I was publicly ordained as an Imam by senior Islamic authorities of the holy city of Qom, Iran, in 2010. I lived the majority of my adult life as a fundamentalist Muslim. As I am sitting before you today, neither I nor my family are fresh converts into Islam. I am the descendant of Adi bin Hatim, who joined forces with Prophet Muhammad since the earliest years of Islam. My ancestors played a key role in the spread of Islam from Arabia throughout the world. I come from a lineage of clerics and grand ayatollahs, and as a third-generation Imam, it is my duty to serve in the best ways possible. Honourable Chair, why I say this is very important to what I will be stating in the coming paragraphs. Until 2014, I wouldn't have set foot into this parliament, as I was taught to believe that this is where man forms laws other than those of God. It took me many years, along with painful experiences, such as my family members being murdered by Islamists, to realize the wrong I was in. When ISIS invaded key parts of Iraq in 2014, I was studying in Karbala, 1.3 hours away. My uncle Faris, who served in the Iraqi army, was kidnapped and burnt alive. As I began to call for social reforms within the Muslim community, I faced some challenges, such as the amount of power the Islamic extremists within the Muslim community in Australia enjoy. As a migrant, the gratitude and loyalty that I feel towards the Australian people who gave me sanctuary knows no bounds. If only the extremists speak, then understandably, our people will suspect that all my co-religionists pose a potential or active threat to society. My current activity involves advising government departments, committees, as well as intelligence agencies on matters concerning Islam, the Muslim community, and the strategies of Islamic extremists. My humble efforts of opposing Islamic terrorism and promoting peace have resulted in ongoing invitations from schools, universities, religious centres and parliaments. And our community in Adelaide has been visited by wonderful members from your political parties today. I assume that this honourable committee is most interested in my suggestions regarding immigration from Islamic countries and communities. Although I cannot fix Australia's problems, I can give you my honest thoughts and opinions on these issues. The vast majority of Australian Muslims wish only to live in peace and harmony. Still, the actions of a minority of Muslims in Australia has caused a growing number of the host community to react not to just overt terrorist attacks, but behaviour that is arrogant and contemptuous towards the nation that gave them a new home. On matters concerning immigration to Australia and the amendments of the Australian Citizenship legislation, I must say that I observe a growing negative reaction to Islamic immigration, a response that I fully understand. There is widespread and growing resentment in many areas within Australia to ideas such as civil Sharia law and so-called no-go zones being advocated. Australian citizenship should be earned. An authentic desire to become an Australian citizen should be demonstrated in consistent behaviour. The length of time required to acquire citizenship must be extended, in my opinion. I would suggest a minimum period of 5 years. During those years, the applicant must undergo at least annual tests. These to be both in English, language proficiency, and in the legal and citizenship duties of an Australian. Also, there must be extensive training in the culture of Australia. This time, I believe, is more than adequate for a migrant to demonstrate that they are making an effort to assimilate into the culture they profess to want to make their new home. Sufficient amount of time must be provided for migrants to integrate with Australian culture and ensure that the values of equality, fair go, civic sense and responsibility, as well as human dignity are better understood and thereby become active participants in the nation-building process. English proficiency is important to succeed in the Australian context. However, it may be aligned to the levels required for their trade or profession. I believe this part was also raised in one of the important submissions on the parliamentary website. I would like to now take your attention to an important development that is taking place within the Muslim community. And it has everything to do with the fact that honourable senators are elected to represent their voters, to represent the people that elect them. That's basically the understanding in principle. But what happens if there is a disconnect between principle and practice? I would like to bring to your attention that there are dangerous members floating around within the Muslim community. We Muslims know this. We also know that there are hundreds under ASIO's watch in different states in Australia. Recently, leaders of the Iraqi Muslim community in Sydney, and we're speaking about 20 or so members, prominent figures, literally begged Pauline Hanson, the Honourable Senator Pauline Hanson, for assistance because they had reached out to their politicians, local politicians, regarding a powerful member that was considered a terrorist in Iraq. And they couldn't find a solution to this problem. And the community couldn't find a problem with this individual, so they wrote to Senator Pauline Hanson, only because she was the only person that displayed concern to such a very critical issue. This is a situation I invite the honourable members of this committee to ponder upon. Are we reflecting the wishes of our voters and their concerns? There are two matters I wish to present to this committee. The first is our responsibility and experience as a nation regarding immigration. I believe that Australia should learn from the rest of the world, especially our allies in Europe, in America, as to how they deal with terrorism, Islamic extremism, and so on. I believe the experience shared by our allies should be taken into serious consideration by Australia when forming such important laws. I believe we should not be taking the risk and depending upon statistics in order to form our laws. I think statistics are nothing that we should be proud of. I think the statistics should be zero, and that we should not take the risk to begin with. Around 50% of Australian Islamic terrorists are native born. So why does this group produce almost all modern Australian terrorists? The Australian majority is not all blind. In fact, even those who are blind can tell that the majority of modern day terrorists in Australia are Islamic extremists. And they are affecting the Muslim community as well as Australia and the greater Australian society. So, do the Australian people have the right to ask one question, 6 words? What is going on here, mate? I think it's very important that we have an answer for this Australian question. And I will leave my comments for the answers that I will be delivering. I've got other issues, but I will leave it at here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that. I will go first of all to the Deputy Chair of the Committee, Senator Pratt.
Thank you, and thank you, Imam Mohammad Tawhidi, for your evidence this morning. As you're aware, Senator Hanson's bill is reasonably close to previous government legislation which this committee inquired into, one of which was, and one of the concerns from the Labor Party was the impact of the English test on vulnerable migrants. And there was clear evidence that the English test would disproportionately impact on women, including those from refugee backgrounds and those that stay at home with parenting responsibilities. Now, I would note, Imam Mohammad Tawhidi, that in some Muslim and Islamic culture, it is the woman's role to, in some families, to stay home with children. And I would be particularly concerned if such tests did see women unable to get the English proficiency that would be required to pass
Is there a question here, Senator Pratt?
Surely you must share these concerns. Have you looked at the gender impacts and the particular impacts on women of this particular test?
Honourable Senator, I believe in 2019 there is no household in the Middle East that can't say a few English words. And I say this with the background of being an Iraqi refugee born in Iran. and constantly traveling throughout the Middle East, I don't think that would stop them from learning English, especially now they're calling their daughters France, America, so on and so forth. Also, I would raise concern that such a argument, if I may put it that way, would encourage Muslim women to stay at home.
No, that was not my point. It was shown that the experience of, if you compare existing Australian migrants in Australia, that the evidence would show that many women have poorer English proficiency than men, simply because they haven't had the same opportunities in the community for work or perhaps education. And that's what the existing evidence of migrants shows. And that the standard required in this test does require a significant level of study. Frankly, I would be concerned that the idea that you're pushed out from might actually be a push towards extremism and radicalism. If you have a message coming from government that says you're not like us because you don't meet this particular test of what an Australian looks like, that is what would feed extremism and radicalism in Australia.
Okay. Honourable Senator, lack of language has never been a reason for any Muslim to be an extremist or to undertake any terrorist attack.
No, I'm not saying that it would be. I'm saying, these issues are clearly deeply psychological.
I understand. We can call it isolation, if you agree with that. Yeah. I don't think so, because I'm a very frank person, as many of you would know. I'd be very honest with you here. There's nothing stopping Muslim women, and I mean elderly mothers, from spending hours and hours in shopping centres, speaking to cashiers, speaking to people in Centrelink. They have no problem, going to places to get their daily chores done. I do understand what you are saying, that this culture basically has their women, let's say, trained, brought up.
I'm not. Islamic culture in Australia is very diverse. I know many Muslim women who work, and I'm good friends with many of those women. But all I'm highlighting is that in migrant communities, where women have been more dominantly at home, their English development can be slower, and it puts them at a disadvantage.
Can I just mention to all committee members that we are here actually to ask questions of the witnesses whose views we have sought.
Yes.
We are after their views, and so I really don't want committee members giving their views or making statements. This goes across the board, because we are here not to listen to each other, but to listen to the witnesses, whether or not we agree with them. Whether or not we agree with them, we're here to hear their views and to ask questions about what they have told us. So, back to you, Senator Pratt.
Thank you. So, how long do you think it might take for a new migrant to become proficient in English?
I believe with the current services available throughout Melbourne and Sydney, there are services that also receive grants from the government, and they have huge signs in migrant-dominated areas that teach English. They come to their homes. Most of them are even Muslim, so there is no barrier of, the lady has to wear the scarf in front of this tutor or English teacher. The services are there. I believe that with the internet, with everything at their disposal, I would give it a maximum of 6 months to be able to construct at least a few sentences and understand at least 50% of what they're hearing, and a whole year to be able to speak freely. And I say that because I have family members who have brought partners from overseas, and that's exactly how much it took them in a normal, regular lifestyle to be able to speak English.
Would you be concerned if people were unable to pass this test even if in all other respects they were fully committed to their Australian citizenship and Australian values?
I think my people are very smart, Honourable Senator. 1 year should be enough for them to at least construct a few sentences. If not, then just take the test once again, I think.
Are you not aware that the test is rather more difficult than being able to construct a few sentences? That's what's proposed in this legislation.
I understand, I've seen it, and I do believe that it is possible.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Senator Pratt. Can I just clarify, Imam, you're proposing a 5-year
Minimum.
period before citizenship's granted, and just in relation to the English language, does that mean that applicants would have effectively 5 years to get a moderate understanding, moderate ability to use the English language?
Correct, Honourable Chair. I believe that 5 years would be more than enough. However, let me be very clear once again. After this, I go straight into the Muslim community. I live amongst them. I know their ability to learn and what we teach them in our private lessons in schools and so on. And we do have many other language classes such as Farsi, Arabic. Some of them don't even speak Arabic. And we even teach them that to learn the Quran. So the ability to learn a language, in my view, is 6 months to 1 year. And they will have another 4 years to prove that. So from the first year, they should be speaking English.
Sorry, this is a bit beside the point, but do you mind saying what is your original your native language?
Arabic.
Arabic.
Yes.
But you speak,
I speak
obviously
Arabic,
very good English.
Farsi, and Aussie English.
Yes, okay, yes you do. And do you speak other languages as well?
No, but I do understand them. Some of them.
Like which ones?
Such as Kurdish, if spoken, Turkish a little bit.
Okay.
I understand simply because, well, it's more of an advantage because there are some words being exchanged between all these languages, so I'm able to put a sentence together.
Yes, okay.
Especially if I'm being insulted, Honourable Chair.
Okay. And as I recall, you said there should be an annual test in that 5-year period and training on the Australian culture.
Correct.
Do I record that correctly?
Yes, Honourable Chair.
What's your idea of an annual test?
I believe that we have people within my community or other migrant communities that might be able to speak perfect English, but still carry ideas or believe that ideas from back home fit perfectly within Australian society, such as female genital mutilation, wife beating, polygamy, so on and so forth. In fact, we have some women that go out shopping for their husbands to marry their second wife or third wife. So I think an annual test just to confirm that we're on the same page with them before the citizenship is issued is something very beneficial.
Sorry, you just mentioned something, and you're serious about actually some wives seeking a second wife for their husband?
Correct. And I have given all this information to the departments concerned that come and visit me in my office. Not only that, we have on-record videos of Muslim women speaking in English, 2 women sitting together in the Muslim community, fundamentalists of course, but still migrants, who are telling each other that beating each other that being beaten by the husband is a blessing. And they give examples as to how the husband should beat the wife. What I mean by annual test is to confirm once again that the person who is being granted a Australian citizenship in the near future is on the same page as the rest of Australians, that such behaviour is not acceptable.
And again, this is slightly off the subject, but bigamy, I think, in Australia is still a criminal offence, that is, having more than one wife, legally married wife. Where there is a second wife, are they legally wives or are they just, in the Australian context, mistresses?
No,
out of wedlock.
Well, firstly, they go to the Imam of the community and the imam conducts a Islamic marriage, and that's all they need. Australian Muslims do not need an Australian court certificate of marriage in order to have a family and make children. It's the Islamic certificate that counts from the imam. And you have one man, this is what's happening with the cases in Australia where they have polygamy. You have one man married to one woman legally, the rest is all Islamically.
I guess in Australia these days, whilst marriage is still very, very important, but a big percentage of Australians choose not to marry. They just live together as a couple, as partners. And I guess that's probably similar in this circumstance. But anyhow, as I say, it's not quite on point. But thank you for that. I'll now go to Senator Hanson.
Well, I'm going to follow up on a question there because what you actually asked about marriage is legal, polygamy is illegal in Australia. But Imam, is it true that even though they can have up to 4 wives and concubines, they have children, that the government does accept them as their wives and they actually are paying them Centrelink payments?
In some cases, yes.
Right. I want to go back to what you said here about the English test. Do you believe that if they do have a proficiency in English, that they will better assimilate into our culture and to communicate with people in our society, to understand our laws and our voting system? Because I'll leave it there.
Honourable
Do you think
Senator.
that for better assimilation into our society?
Yes, Honourable Senator, I believe so, because that is exactly what we have seen happen in other countries where migrants learn the language and they are able to make better use of the opportunities at hand and make the country a better place, be able to serve their society. And I also do not see any obstacle between a migrant learning English and serving the country. In fact, many migrants would love to have the opportunities the majority of Australians have. So I don't find any objection, and I feel that yes, by learning English, they will be able to assimilate better and integrate better.
Once citizenship is granted, then there is the right to vote. If they cannot understand English, how would they understand the laws or what they're voting for or who they're voting for? And if they can't speak English, then how are they going to vote? Or are they entitled? And as Senator Pratt said, women have trouble in voting. Then does she actually vote, or does her husband vote for her? It's your society.
Honourable Senator, there is a growing tradition now whereby migrant communities, especially the Muslim communities who don't speak English, are placing their votes in vote banks. And then the leaders of the community take those votes from the voting bank and give it to whatever party they feel. It's happening in other countries. This is what's being discussed in the Muslim community in Australia. I've had several meetings in my own house with leaders of the Muslim community in Adelaide, and they are planning on having a Muslim vote bank. I think not only does this interfere in elections, I also think that it becomes a barrier between the Australian citizen, potential Australian citizen, and the rest of Australian society.
Probably illegal too.
Some countries have allowed it. Yeah.
Well, that's of great concern when we have at least 16 electorates that are Muslim-dominated, that are Labor electorates who control the vote. Anyway, I shall move on. You said, which I was very concerned, that 50% of terrorists are foreign-born. Is that correct?
That's actually a very conservative percentage. It's actually
is that here in Australia, or is that...
Australia, it's actually more than that. But as I said, in our statistics, we take the least just to be safe. If you take a look at the terrorist attacks that have happened in recent years, the majority of them were from Muslims. And, I don't believe in the whole mental illness issue. Maybe one or two. but I don't believe in that. And in fact, I believe that the terrorist would be insulted if he were to come back to life and say, and he was told that, hey, you were mentally ill. In fact, he would consider himself a wonderful jihadi who did the right thing. So with all of this combined, yes, it's more than 50 actually.
So when a Muslim family comes here to Australia, you believe they should wait 5 years and to get their citizenship. Do you think that this bill should also include minors? What's your view on that with the children and also getting their citizenship?
Honourable Senator, in our intel briefs and when we sit with intelligence agencies, the recruitable age for a vulnerable Muslim or a Muslim that's looking for a place is anywhere from 12 years to 25. Anything above that is considered, let's say, someone a passionate or determined amateur. Let's also clarify, I'd like to establish that even the most extreme Islamic organizations, such as Hizb ut-Tahrir, who operate throughout Australia, mainly in Sydney, will not have the most extreme Muslims as its members, because the extremist Muslim organizations operate upon a specific strategy, and determined amateurs who are influenced by what's happening in the Middle East, they're only good to be used for terrorist attacks. They're not people that are taken in as members. Therefore, if they can't take them in as members, obviously they're 12, 15, can't be a member of a huge extreme organization. So they use them for terrorist attacks. And a good example would be the murder of police officer Curtis Cheng, 15-year-old, 14, 16. This is the age, Farhad Jabbar, for example. This is the age that people target. It's the target market, anywhere from under 20 to 25. So I do believe that it would also include minors, yes.
Do you think that by going from 2 years, that it is at the moment, to having to wait for 5 years, or on my bill it's 8 years, do you think that will impact on the people? They feel they won't be wanted in the country, or they won't feel, that they won't feel wanted? Do you think that waiting, because as a permanent resident, you have everything you're entitled to, the only thing that you're not entitled to is the vote. Do you think that having to wait that extra period of time is going to impact on them more so than the benefits that you can see to the Australian people, ensuring that we have the right people with the right character, the right intentions, that they truly want to be Australians?
Honourable Senator, I think there's a big difference between waiting for something you know you will achieve and being told that you will never achieve it. In the UAE, for example, Indian workers, permanent residents, who even marry into UAE citizens, they are told that they will never become citizens. And because they are told, they know from the very beginning they will never be accepted into society. What this amendment will do is basically tell them, you are more than welcome to become Australians and part of this Australian family. However, speak our language and understand our values and our culture. I think that's exactly what would be expected from any Australian that travels to Saudi Arabia. In fact, our foreign minister, former foreign minister, traveled to Iran. She had to put the hijab on, right? And these basic greetings of Khubi, Khastanabashi, in Farsi, hello, how are you? This is how society operates. That's how meetings have become successful. It's with that language barrier. When it's no longer there, people can get along with their lives. And when you are promising a migrant a wonderful future, I mean, they can see it. It's not like they're being shown a picture from Google or something. They live here, they see the benefits, they see successful members from their own religion, their own community. They see Dr. Mohammad, Dr. Ali, Engineer Hussein. How did they get there? They learned English. And they understood the culture and they lived by it, so they became successful. So them being told to wait while seeing a promising future in Australia is not offensive. It will never drive them into isolation. It's just a matter of getting the task done.
Do you think that the promotion of a multicultural society is demonising the Australian culture?
I believe there is only one culture in this country that can operate successfully. So one culture for a successful Australian society, and that is the Australian culture. That's how it is in every country I have visited. Every country that's stable. Iran, it's the Iranian culture. Iraq, it's the Iraqi culture. Saudi Arabia, it's their culture. I understand that we have people with different cultures. I would more support a multi-ethnic community that fall under one culture instead of everybody bringing in their own culture. That's what makes Australia Australia. That's very important to preserve the country's identity. I mean, even me, look at me, I'm dressing like this because it's an official hearing. After this, Honourable Chair, I'm wearing my jeans because that's how it's like in Australia. If we want to live amongst people, we can't keep creating these barriers between ourselves and the rest of society.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Senator.
Just a very, very quick question. I just want to follow up on something you said in your opening statement, Imam, which was that you suggested training in the culture of Australia, which is a difficult thing to even articulate, the exact culture of Australia. But what do you suggest when you said training in the culture of Australia? And I think you said ongoing training in the culture of Australia. So what did you have in mind?
The common understanding that we have today in Australia is that you cannot have more than one wife. You can't undergo FGM. You can't force your children into madrasas. You can't take your children back home to Iraq if she's 13, which is one of the cases that I dealt with. 13-year-old marry her off to her 31-year-old cousin. Right? These are things that don't happen in Australia, and Australian citizens shouldn't have to go through them, shouldn't have to experience them. Why I say ongoing? Because these things never end. Every month there's a new issue. Right? So I think ongoing is basically just to cover the new contemporary issues that keep showing up, the societal problems that never end. That's basically to get everything covered. As for the training, would be to be on one page with the migrants, whether they be Muslim or not, that this is how things operate in Australia.
Yeah. This is interesting. I can understand how that would be quite valuable for Muslim migrants that are seeking permanent residency and then eventually citizenship. But there are so many people, all you do is, you attend a citizenship ceremony, which everybody around this table has done, and there are people from all over the globe. If somebody is seeking citizenship and they're from Ireland, we have to be even-handed about this. Do we make those people sit through lessons on culture about FGM and polygamy and those sorts of things that really don't apply to their home cultures?
Right, they don't apply to them, but there will be many other issues that I believe would be relevant for them to understand. Honourable Senator, even though certain issues such as FGM don't apply to people from Ireland, I think just a clarification of what the Australian values are, them reading them, understanding them, and passing the test, which is exactly what we want from them, right? So if they pass the test, then good. That's my view on the issue.
Okay. Can I ask you too, and I'm referring back to a conversation you had just before with Senator Hanson, that you said 50% of Islamic terrorists in Australia are Australian born, and I think you might have changed that testimony to say probably slightly under 50%. My concern there is that potentially are we trying to deal with a law and order issue using a citizenship issue as the weapon? Is that a rather blunt instrument to address a law and order issue?
Honourable Senator, I think the end goal here is national security and to make sure that the people receiving citizenship are safe for Australia. And mentioning the issue of potential terrorists, taking into consideration the serious bad experience we've had from refugees and migrants, sadly, my co-religionists, I believe it's very important that we have that there mentioned and on record.
Thank you. Just finally, you suggested too that the English requirement, you suggested that it should be aligned to trade and profession. I think this is an interesting issue for a committee like this because obviously, and particularly in your community, as Senator Pratt pointed out, traditionally a lot of women stay at home and look after have family responsibilities. How do you align the English requirements to a trade and profession for people that don't have a trade and profession other than home duties?
Might be a trade and profession, isn't it? Home duties.
Honourable Senator, I put that in there for those who come in from the Middle East with, for example, doctor degrees or whatever, and then wish to operate as doctors within Australian society. There are certain tests they need to take, but before they are able to pass those tests, what they do is, and we see this a lot in the Muslim community, he's a taxi driver and he tells everyone that he's actually a doctor back home. The point is, even that individual has to learn the language, even though he's a doctor or what, even though he's able to convert his degrees or certificates or whatever. As for the Muslim community, the females, we keep coming back to the females. Let me be very clear. Most of the females that stay at home do make money at home, especially with the new childcare program. Not so new, but it's new for the new migrants, right? Stay at home and take care of each other's kids. Even they need to learn English because there are certificates in childcare that they need to get. I think it's certificate 1, 2, and 3. They need to fill out hours and forms. Based on their profession, they will need that level of English at least to understand that, hey, if you put more hours in, that's against the law, that's fraudulent behavior, this is how you take care of the child, this is what's illegal, this is what's not. Basically, that's what I meant by making sure that they have the suitable level of English just to do what they do in Australia.
I agree. I think even for women who stay at home and have family responsibilities, a proficient level of English is absolutely vital to make sure that they are connected and immersed in their own communities. So I agree with you there. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Senator Hume. Imam, thank you very, very much for your attendance today. Whether or not we agree with you, we very much appreciate your coming along and the frankness of your advice. Tell me, just as an aside question, have you ever received threats to your safety and life?
Plenty.
Yes. Okay.
There's a scar right here,
Okay.
which my turban covers, but without the turban, it's very prominent.
Yeah.
Got a scar here. Yeah.
Okay. Well, again, thank you very much for coming along and
Thank you
helping
for having me
with
on,
the
Chair.
evidence you've given. We very much appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for having me.